Welcome back to another episode of Stripped by Sia, your podcast for strippers, sex workers, and all the fancy naked people in between. I am your host, Steph Sia, aka Sia on camera online, formerly known as Kimchi on stage. I am an adult content creator. I've been really leaning into that for the past a lot. Like this year for sure. I've been really leaning into that and kind of shifting away from the podcast. As you guys all know, this is the last season for the show. Due to a number of reasons, I know I kind of briefly mentioned it last month, but yeah, it's just time to say goodbye to this baby. It's been like 7 years of doing this, which has been extremely humbling and amazing. And I've met so many of you folks from all around the world, which I love. I am continuing my advocacy here locally in Vancouver, Canada, with a couple boards and organizations that I sit on here. But yeah, life's moving on forward, and I'm transitioning into other chapters of life. So that's kind of why I've taken a longer extended summer break than usual. But yeah, we're going to go into some more exciting chapters. So yeah, I haven't decided yet, but this will be a considerably shorter season. And I'm just trying to wrap things up. And who knows, this isn't the last episode, but might be one of the last ones. Stay tuned. But if you've been around forever, thank you so much for listening and your support over these several years. It's been amazing. And, you know, I have had listeners from all over the world, including my Patreon subscribers. We've got Snoo all the way from Germany, which is really crazy. We've got Geyser. We've got Eric Arajo. We've got Bia York, Dan from Red Door Products. Both of you are from Seattle, Washington. We've got McKenna King from Ottawa. We've got Dale Flood from Vancouver. We've got Raina all the way from Sweden. We've got Ruby from Victoria, BC. You guys are all over the place, and you guys are just the ones in the top tier, so you guys always get a fan recognition shout out. But thank you so much for your support. If you do want to continue, I am still posting on my Patreon as well, like what's going on down here, any kind of like guest speaking or lecture things that I'm doing. There's lots of cool bonus content you can do and find there. So again, it's patreon.com/strippedbysia. I am still keeping my website up and stuff like that. So yes, as you know, your money goes towards basically that, keeping my website up and funded. But if you are listening for the first time, I mean, you have so many episodes to kind of listen to from season 1. This show is all about destigmatizing sex work. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, I myself am a sex worker. I've dabbled in many different areas and corners within the industry, from being a sugar baby to being a stripper to working in adult as a solo performer with content creation and camming. I've been all over the place, and it's been a wild ride. But please, again, every single week is about destigmatizing sex work, and I do that in different ways in terms of like bringing different people on from their corners of the industry. So this week is no different. We are going to be getting the angle of an intimacy coordinator and choreographer. And I'm very excited to have this conversation. It's funny because we only had begun chats about intimacy coordination on this show specifically just in season 6. So it's really good that we're continuing on this conversation, why intimacy coordination is so important, especially in adult work. We are going to be talking about a book that is coming out, The History of Intimacy, Professionals Entertainment. Brooke M. Haney is the author. They are also an actor. They have done much work in mainstream entertainment. So working for CBS, NBC, HBO, Amazon Prime, Paramount Plus, Peacock, Warner Brothers, 20th Century Fox, and more. We're going to be talking about, why intimacy coordination is super important. We'll talk about consent, safety, how it lends into this big conversation. So enough of me talking and rambling. Please welcome Brooke M. Haney to the show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We are so excited for you to be here, and we were chatting just a little bit off before recording, and we have a ton of stuff to chat about today here, Brooke. I mean, I've listed a couple things of things you're involved in your work, who you are, but I always love to give the opportunity for my guests to kind of describe themselves in their own words and terms. So I'm going to pass the mic back to you, and feel free to give the audience your own introduction as well.
If I were to describe myself in my own words, I think I'm a curious person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that plays into a lot of what I've gotten into in my career. I think that starting as an actor, part of that was wanting to live as many lives as possible, wanting to be able to
Totally.
put myself in other people's shoes and get to like live there for a little while. Plus, I like romanticized the idea of, playing a chef, practicing knife skills, and then playing a doctor. And so, like, you know, I never played a doctor, but like in a magical world, going and like observing a surgeon for a week or something. I always thought it would be cool to like get to take a year of your life and do 26 like 2-week internships in different professions. I thought that would be so fun.
Yeah.
I was really lucky as an actor that in all of my intimate scenes, I experienced no trauma. I always had a great time. I had really wonderful directors. I had scene partners who were very respectful. And when I say really wonderful directors, I mean directors who made me feel like I had that either set clear expectations or made me feel like I had agency. I will say, like in high school, I had my very first kiss on stage in high
Wow.
school in Fiddler on the Roof. I was Hoddle, I kissed the boy playing Pear Chick, and then the director told us to go backstage and practice. So, like,
Oh
that's
my
not
gosh.
great.
Yeah.
Like
No.
two high school kids. I mean, we were fine. But that is an example of why I think intimacy coordinators need to exist, or intimacy directors if you're talking about theater, or choreographers, and starting at a young age. It's interesting. I've gotten pushback at times about like, is this too young to start? We don't want kids talking about sex. But like boundaries, consent, power dynamics, those should be taught from a very young age. And
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and we can definitely go into that too.
yeah, absolutely. So I think my work as an actor is really what brought me into working as an intimacy coordinator.
Sure.
I had a tendency to either be cast in roles that experienced physical intimacy or where the characters experienced trauma. And so my first avenue into intimacy was through closure practices. I wanted to know, like, how can I play a survivor of domestic violence and then, go to math class or something. This is in college.
Yeah.
And like, how can I really go there but still like live a healthy life? And when I started to teach, I wanted better for my students than I had had. So I workshopped. I taught at Marymount Manhattan College in Manhattan, and I took a bunch of alumni and students, and they helped me workshop a warm down for actors that's meant to take you from, if you're an actor and your body is in the place of like fear or grief or whatever, your body experiences it as if it's really happening. It doesn't know it's fake, even though your brain knows it's fake.
Yeah.
So we created a warm down that allows your body to open up, to let go of that, to kind of like complete the cycle.
Yeah.
And so that was the first thing that brought me to intimacy. And
Yes.
I'm queer and I came out late in life. And I knew immediately that I wanted to tell queer stories and also that I only had a straight lens. So I took a year, and every day I either listened to something, watched something, took a class, anything, listened to a podcast, anything on BDSM and kink and queer sex. Because I believe very strongly that having the identity doesn't mean you have the experience. And having the experience doesn't mean you know how to tell the story.
Right.
So that was a huge thing. And so then people started bringing me into theater to be like, oh, Brooke can teach this warm down, or Brooke can stage this bondage scene. And then one day a theater asked me if I would be their intimacy director again. And I was like, dear Google, what's an intimacy director? And sure enough, this thing that I had been doing, other people were doing too, and it now had a name. And so I worked in theater primarily until the pandemic. And when the pandemic hit and theaters shut down, film and TV came back first. And I had already consulted on a couple films, but I hadn't worked as an intimacy coordinator on set, only as an actor. And in that moment, I pivoted. I didn't think I would love it, to be honest. And I loved it. immediately.
Yeah.
And so now I still do some theater, but primarily TV and film.
There we go.
And you had said I should define intimacy coordinator before we start.
Yeah, we should definitely yes. Let's start there before we get into deeper topics.
Totally. So if you didn't listen to one of the previous episodes of this amazing podcast that had an intimacy conversation, intimacy coordinators most often work in mainstream media, staging scenes that have nudity or simulated sex within the actor's boundaries and to the director's vision. Now, we'll, I'm sure, get to it, but there are also intimacy coordinators working in porn, and the only difference really is you take out the simulated.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so glad you said that. So there's a couple players involved with intimacy coordination. There's obviously the actors or performers, and the in the scene. You also have the director as well, and then hopefully, I feel like most sets would have an intimacy coordinator there to facilitate a couple things here. So there's like choreography, blocking, but also trying to convey what the director is trying to say too, I'm sure. So kind of playing that middle ground, or I mean, it's definitely its own specific role, but like there's a couple people that are involved here. So there's actors and consent, their boundaries, but also the director has a specific like vision and stuff too. There's a lot of things involved there. So maybe we can talk about like the role and why it's so important to have that person on set.
I would love to work in porn. I'm just saying that out there to anyone listening who wants to hire me. I have primarily worked in mainstream media, though I have friends that have been ICs for porn. When I say IC, I mean intimacy coordinator. But what I will say about mainstream media is the power dynamics are really intense. You know, it could be that you have a A-list actor in a scene with someone who is a background actor or who is co-star or guest star. And a thing that can come into play in that case is this younger or less experienced or less prominent actor really wants the approval or respect or whatever of this A-list actor. And that can muddy consent. Similarly, directors and producers have so much power because they give the jobs. And I imagine that is true not in non-mainstream media as well. And so there is a desire to please. There's a desire to be easy to work with, to say yes. I mean, in acting training, I think most people know the improv rule, yes and, that you should say yes to an offer and then add something. And so a lot of work that I think actor training programs need to be doing right now is teaching a no but. Like, no, I won't do that, but here's something I will do. Or here is an offer I have, right? That no is a full sentence, but it doesn't have to be the end of the sentence.
Yeah, it's not a full stop.
Right. And I don't mean no, and then I'm going to explain why I'm saying no. No, perfect. But here's an idea I have. You know, like, let's all learn to be flexible and pivot. So the reason an intimacy coordinator is important is because we are there, ideally, as much as possible, to dismantle the power dynamic. And what I mean by that is I or an intimacy coordinator would meet privately with the directors and producers to find out what's the story we're trying to tell and what are your asks of the actor. Now, these asks should not be news to the actor. If they're being asked to do simulated sex or nudity, they should know that in advance. It's required for a SAG-AFTRA film as part of the audition process.
Gotcha.
But what exactly that's going to look like, I remember when I was acting, before I was in the union, getting a non-union job where there was a shower scene. And I wasn't told in advance, like, what will we see?
Yeah.
And my brain did so much around, like, okay, what are my boundaries? How will I look good? What will the shot be? What are they going to see? It ended up being me pulling my head outside of a curtain and just yelling someone's name. I wasn't even nude, but no one told me in advance. And so a big part of an intimacy coordinator's job is to find out a lot of information from the director and give that to the actors so their brain isn't trying to figure out what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Their brain can focus on
totally.
the character. Because actors are willing to do a lot if they know what they're being asked to do.
Yeah.
It's just hard if
sure.
you're in the position where the lights are on, we've set the scene. Once TV and film is moving, it is moving train. And it moves fast, and there's not a lot of time to think and consider. So a big part of my job is giving actors time to consider the asks in advance so that on the day, they're just ready to do the job that they were hired for.
Yeah.
And then on the day, I'll help choreograph it as well.
For sure.
But I think that as far as the consent, that's the important part, is the getting them information.
Yeah, that's so important. And, you know, like, I actually love that there are so many parallels with the acting world and, like, you know, entertainment with the adult industry as well. Even talking about, like, you know, your warm down and stuff too, like, you know, post care is super, super important. But like when we're talking here and talking about, like, you know, being on set, it's, it shares a lot with the adult industry, like the mainstream entertainment, and, you know, having as much information to begin with does a lot. It helps prepare the performer for what to expect. I mean, of course, with adult work, you're going to actually have penetration on set during the scene, right? So there are certain expectations once you are commit to being in this industry. There are a lot of asks and expectations that are required of you. But sometimes, like when you were saying, oh, sometimes you have this A-list actor, or you might have this older actor, and you have this background actor coming in. I could also draw parallels with that too, in terms of like someone is just breaking out into porn. It's maybe their first or second shoot, and they want to be that yes and person because they want to be able to get more work, and they don't want to come off as a diva. They don't want to come off as I'm hard to work with. It's really important for them to please the director and also just be a decent person to work with on set. But it can be tricky when you do have the added layer of actual sex, penetrable sex on set. So, because I'm sure you can probably comment on this too, but there are instances, and maybe this is before intimacy coordination was really defined and that maybe it didn't quite exist yet, but there have been instances on set where something has happened, someone's boundaries have been crossed and consent was not discussed. Maybe we can go into that kind of conversation, like what led us to this point in the industry. I know I could think of like Me Too, but even preceding that time, I'd love to know a little bit about the history, if you can share a little bit about that on your end, Brooke.
Totally. It's so funny. I'm so glad you made the connection of adult film and mainstream media being so similar, because I actually start the book. The very first thing I talk about is what sex workers have given intimacy coordinators tools. A thing that I think is so awesome about sex work that I think sometimes working in mainstream media, people still want to tiptoe around, like, well, we would kind of like you to maybe, you know, and whereas like if it's sex work, it's just like, here are the things we would like. Are you willing to do them?
Right.
Like, here is what we're offering financially. What else do you know? Like, I just feel so much very transparent.
Yeah, as it should be, though.
As it should be. There is a lot that we have taken from the sex worker industry that has positively impacted mainstream media. And that, I mean, even the idea of a writer, which in mainstream media is there's a nudity or an intimacy writer, which lays out for actors, and this happened well before intimacy coordinators existed, that lays out, like, here's what we're asking from you. A topless nudity, simulated oral sex. A burial will be provided, the set will be closed, you know, and it lays out the ideas. But like that idea of, let's make a contract. Let's make clear expectations.
Yes.
So we can come back to that conversation if we want to. But you'd said about what was happening even before Me Too. And there were people working in this well before Me Too. There's a really cool intimacy coordinator named Yehuda Duenas who works and lives in LA. And they were in, I think it was either 2007 or 2008, brought to New York to work on an off-Broadway show. I'm not going to remember the name of the show right off the top of my head, but they were brought to choreograph the sex. So Yehuda said, okay, but I want to be called a sex choreographer.
Yes.
Right? Totally.
That's so badass.
Right? Yehuda's now an intimacy coordinator. And it's so funny. There's this interview with them from 2007 or 2008 in the New York Times or the New Yorker in a publication where they say, I hope to be doing this in TV and film someday. And now they are. And I think it was, if I'm remembering right, Westworld, and there was another TV show well before the Me Too movement where they had a position that they called like a sexographer or a sex stylist.
Yes.
Or the movie Bound. Ooh, I'm forgetting the woman's name. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh my gosh.
It's like a lesbian movie from like, I don't know, the 80s or 90s.
Yeah.
Should have put this in my notes. But they brought in basically a sex educator, and she helped choreograph the sex because they wanted to make sure it was authentic lesbian sex.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of the job as an IC is also the authenticity. I specialize in queer stories, and what I want is to bring authenticity to them, and ideally to bring things that we haven't seen before. Because, you know, for example, often when we see queer sex, it still looks very straight. Like, let's throw in some toys. Let's, for the people on Patreon, I have like a whole sex toy wall behind me.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like, let's throw in some toys because queer folks use toys, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like throw some toys into queer sex. Let's throw some into straight sex. The stigma around toys is so intense.
Yes.
Anyway, there were people doing it before there was this intimacy coordinator title.
Right.
And the thing was, the phone wasn't ringing because studios weren't financially incentivized to hire us. And it seems wild now because you would never say to someone, we're going to put you in this fight scene. And that person say like, no problem, I know how to throw a punch. Great, go ahead and go in there and do it, right? Like, we have a stunt coordinator for that. And in the same way, now, in mainstream media, we should not be saying to someone, go in there and simulate oral sex. No problem, I know how to do that. Like, you don't. You might know how to do it for real, but you don't know how to fake it. So it really did take the Me Too movement. It really did. It took all these, like, really brave actors coming forward and saying, you know, either this happened to me on set or this happened to me on a casting couch. Like, a casting couch is a cliche for a reason, you know?
Yeah.
And I think what's important is, like, all of that was this power dynamic we talked about, right? These people in power taking advantage of people that wanted work.
Yes.
Or I've heard stories from actors I've worked with now that weren't necessarily part of the Me Too movement, but where like things happened because once the camera was rolling, they knew they're not allowed to call cut and something is going on that does not feel right and they don't know how to handle it. And there's no one there to have their back. So it really did take the Me Too movement. Alicia Rodis, who, did you ever watch The Deuce?
No, I didn't, but do tell.
Okay, so The Deuce was an HBO show. I wish you'd watched it because I would love to talk with you about it.
Damn it.
And it's the first show to have someone use the title intimacy coordinator. And it was Alicia Rodis. And it was because in their first season, some things didn't feel great. And so Alicia Rodis had been doing this work. She was a stunt coordinator and an actor, or a stunt performer and an actor. And she was working at NYU, working with students. And somebody was like, you do She had been teaching to a group of women. She had this like practice group maybe called Galhalla instead of Valhalla.
Okay.
And they would practice like fight choreography, but then they would also practice intimacy choreography. And someone at NYU heard and was like, can you help with that? And then folks at HBO had this problem they needed to fix, and they were like, let's call Alicia. We hear she's doing some of that work at HBO.
Cool.
And the reason I wish you'd seen The Deuce is because it's about the adult film industry. And so it's so wild that the first mainstream media show that had an intimacy coordinator was about the adult film industry.
Wow.
And so Alicia went on and set protocols and started to create this role. And I am guessing, I don't know if she's ever exactly told me this, but because a lot of it was designed after the stunt coordinator role, I'm guessing that's where intimacy coordinator came from.
Right. As
opposed to sex choreographer, which was so much more
fun. I love that title, though.
I know, right? It's way better.
It's way better.
It's way better. Or sex. I also like sex stylist.
I like that too.
Yeah, it's fun.
Such a missed opportunity.
Basically, like, that's when the phone started to ring, was when the Me Too movement happened, and studios were like, I don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
Like, let's be clear, it wasn't actually about out of the goodness of their heart.
No.
Right?
Damn.
Some people, I'm sure it is.
Yes.
But yeah, the Me Too movement happened, and that created a demand.
Yeah, definitely create. I mean, demand has always been there, but I guess we just didn't know what to call it. There could have been like a lot of tiptoeing around that too. And you said, Alicia said these protocols. Yeah, we do need to have some kind of guidelines on set. Even in adult work too. Like I'm curious to see, like, is there like a checklist or things that like that the intimacy coordinator discusses with the actors, discusses with the director? If you can kind of like maybe walk us through that kind of process, if there is one. I'd love to hear about it. So
different ICs have different ways in which they do their job, but some things are very, very similar. A thing that I do is I always start by doing a risk assessment. I read through a script and I write down any risk I could see. It could be a power dynamic. It could be like, well, we're shooting nudity, but it's on location on a beach. That's a public beach. So how am I going to close set? You know, and by close set, if you don't know what that means like the fewest number of crew members, only anyone necessary to get the shot. We shut down monitors to anyone who doesn't need to see it in order to do their job. But it also would mean like no guests on set, right? On a regular day, you could like bring the producer's daughter to bring your kid to work day. You can't do that on a day where there's a closed set. So that might be very difficult if, for example, we're shooting in public. I worked with an actor recently who told me that she'd shot a simulated sex scene up against a window. And like she was totally excited about it. And then she got to set, and this was before ICs, and realized they were in a very public place. And there was like a bachelor party happening across the way.
Of course there was.
Crowds, right?
My God.
So there was no privacy. So like that's an example of a risk. So I would in my risk assessment say, like, here are the risks. Here are some ways we could mitigate those risks. So that's the first thing. The second thing, we're going to meet with the producer or the director and talk through these risks, as well as the storytelling aspects, and find out what is your vision, what do you want from the actors. Then we go to the actors and we talk to them. And then things jump into place around protocols like, okay, is it simulated sex? Then we need a barrier. Because in mainstream media, there can be no actual sex. So that means that there needs to be something between the two actors that prevents stimulation.
Penetration.
And penetration. But stimulation and the exchange of fluids. So it can look like a piece of silicone. It can look like a yoga mat. It can look like a deflated Pilates ball. It depends on what the scene looks like. If the actors need to look like, let's say we're doing a period piece and the actors need to look naked, we could take a modesty garment, put a barrier behind it, put a merkin or a pubic wig on the front of it. And all of a sudden, there is a barrier between the actor's actual genitalia, but it still looks,
Gotcha.
like that person
Real.
is nude.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we
That's
do
cool.
all of that. There also can't be, for example, an erect penis in mainstream media, not an actual one.
Gotcha.
So if you ever see an erect penis, that is a prosthetic. And those
Gotcha.
are made in a bunch of ways. They can be live cast, they can be purchased. So part of it is like I might go to the special effects team and say, okay, so we need 5 erect penises for this. And what I might be doing is talking with the actor about circumcised versus uncircumcised. Not that it has to match the actor's actual genitalia, but what would you like?
Yeah. They have the option. That's so cool.
Options, yeah. When I'm working in lower budget and we're not making it for the actor, I'll often send them to a website that has prosthetics and say, tell me the skin tone that best matches you and which of these prosthetics is the best for you. And then they can pick.
I love that. That's so cool.
Because, it is an extension of their body in this scene.
Yeah. Totally.
Sometimes the director might want a particular, type of prosthetic. Like we're looking for a very large penis prosthetic, or we're looking for a very small penis prosthetic, or, so the actor doesn't always get 100% say, but when possible, we give them agency.
We like to, try to accommodate.
Yeah.
That must be fun to shop for.
So fun to shop for. Also, occasionally I've been in charge of bringing them places on very, very low budget projects. It's very fun to go through TSA with
yes,
5
I can imagine
in your bag.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So it's those kinds of protocols. And then on set, it's everything from checking with the actors, making sure the actors have a chance to talk through their boundaries, closing the set, which can involve a bunch of things, making sure that the monitors have flags on them, which are like pieces of fabric or, wood that goes around to make the monitor only visible to the people that actually have to see it. So if people need to walk by to do a different job, but they don't need to see the monitor, it's not visible to them. So there's protocols like that as well. There's protocols around mints and mouthwash and, I ask actors if they're going to have to kiss. I ask them, like, do you have any cuts or sores in your mouth today?
Right.
Because there's sexual health.
Lots of things to consider. Yeah, lots of stuff to consider for sure. And that's that goes along with as you mentioned, health and safety to protect each individual that's involved in the scene. I think that's great to hear that there's such a care and attention to detail, because you are involving people, with actors and performers. Like you obviously want to create a safe environment for them and also as low risk as possible, right?
Yeah.
So Wow.
And I think that's the case. It's low risk, right? And safer. I can't make a safe environment. Safety is defined by different people in different ways, but we can make it as safe as we can. We can do our best to anticipate.
Absolutely. And I think that's such an important piece, and a really, really important part of your role is to ensure as much of a safe environment as you can. So that's why these protocols really need to be set in place for that. As you mentioned, safety is a big, 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 big umbrella, and your definition of safety might differ from my definition of safety. Say mainstream media, their definition of safety might be a little bit different from what we experience on set in adult. So let's talk a bit more about safety and what other ways we can ensure that the actors are safe, and even you talking about closed set and talking about the consent and privacy issues. There's a lot of things to consider as well as health too. But if you wanted to elaborate more on the safety aspect and why that's super, super important.
Yeah. I mean, there are differences. And the one thing that I would say is very much the same, whether it's adult film or mainstream media, is consent. Right?
Yes.
It doesn't matter what the act is. If you haven't consented to it, then harm is happening. And it doesn't matter what the act is. If you have consented to it, then we're doing all right. So I think consent is the biggest part of it, is giving people time to consider. That's such a big one. Time can be coercive if we're rushed. So giving as much information in advance as possible. With SAG-AFTRA, actors have to be given their intimacy nudity rider 48 hours in advance of filming that scene. And that 48 hours is specifically so they have time to think about it.
Yeah.
Even though they've already said that they'll do nudity, the writer is going to detail it for them. And of course, consent can always be withdrawn.
Yeah.
But we're putting all this in place in hopes that the person has information so that unless something happens, they are ready and excited to do what is being asked of them.
Yeah, for sure.
And not that they have to be excited. I'm not someone that thinks consent has to be enthusiastic. I think that, like, we can, as artists, whether it's adult film artistry or mainstream artistry, we can sometimes want to do a thing that makes us feel uncomfortable. And we can decide, like, I want to push myself in this way.
Right, challenge myself in this way.
Yeah, challenge myself.
For sure.
Yeah, like, I don't ever tell actors I'm going to make them comfortable. I tell them, I'm here to make you feel prepared.
Yeah, prepared. So, I think that's like such a good word to use in this kind of context.
Yeah. So hopefully people can do brave work. Hopefully they do feel safe. But I think consent is about having the information and having a no be possible. If no isn't possible, then consent doesn't exist.
Right. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. And sometimes the no is the greatest gift to the intimacy coordinator. I've had people withdraw consent on the day. Yeah. Where they've agreed to something and then they're like, I can't do it. And I often say to them, I don't need your reason. I just need to know as quickly as possible what you're not willing to do and what you are willing to do. And not to rush them, but to give them the freedom to not have to justify it to me.
Totally.
You know? Yeah. And once you've told me what you will do, I can go to the director and say, cool, we have a new boundary today. This is how I think we could tell the story just as well with this boundary. Here's 3 options. And sometimes really more creative storytelling comes out of that. Because it's very easy to just, when you're hurrying in film and TV, to just replicate what you've already seen.
Right.
But when you have this boundary, all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I've got to get creative. And
yeah, you got to innovate.
It looks way cooler. So
that's interesting. Yeah, and I can be challenging that way too, but also would hopefully bring a bit more texture to your role too, because like of course you have to be prepared for any situation of whether they're going to say yes or no, and you're like, okay, now I got to kind of scramble in my mind and offer something else, because you're kind of almost like that middle man in that situation, which can be challenging. I have a question for you that's like out, but also related to a conversation too. Like this is not really applicable to the adult industry, because we're going to be obviously in adult work. We're talking about 2 consenting adults. What about coordinating and choreographing scenes where you have a minor and an adult, and how to facilitate consent in those situations and to ensure that that minor is actually going to be safe and feels secure in their role? Because that can be tricky.
An important question. So my personal soapbox is that the intimacy coordination industry is not a catch-all. Like each IC can't do everything.
Right.
There are just like a doctor, you can have your general doctor degree that you get and you can do general medicine. But if you want to be a brain surgeon, you specialize. If you want to be a pediatrician, you specialize. If you want to work in podiatry, that's a specialty. I believe it's the same in intimacy coordination. So when I say I specialize in queer stories, I don't mean I'm gay, therefore I do gay stuff. You know, I said it before, I studied for a year and continue to study. I was just yesterday sitting in the park reading a book about trans sex. Because I am queer doesn't mean I have every experience.
Right.
And, I don't even have every cis-passing white lady vagina haver experience, I just have my experiences, but if I want to be a specialist in that area, I need to be constantly training. So I feel that working with minors is a specialty.
Yeah,
I'm
for sure.
really good with kids. I actually, as an actor, work for a theater company where I work with kids in hospitals. It's a thing I've been doing for 8 years. It's the greatest job besides intimacy coordination that's ever happened. And I don't work with very often at all working with minors on set. I will for some things, but if it's not my specialty and the laws differ state to state.
Yes, that
And
too.
so, like, someone who's working with minors needs to know the laws. They need to know child.
Right.
But I have worked with kids where it's like a child who needs to hug a parent that's not their real parent. And I will come in and work on with that. I worked on a film where a child, the script asked for the child to be naked. And I was like, we can't do that. So I talked to the director through things that might work for the story, and then worked with the parents to make sure that was a thing that worked for the kid, and then talked to the kid about it.
Yeah,
and
lots of people involved
with that. Nudity, because the kid never ended up appearing nude at all. The kid ended up appearing in like underwear type clothing, but like very covered, very nothing that anyone. It was very much not nudity. But, I still wanted the kid to have the option to consent. Like, this is going to be your costume. We're thinking, is this a costume you're okay wearing? Because even if the kid has no idea necessarily, the fact that they're given the opportunity to make a choice is really important. Because it's so easy. I mean, we, from a very young age, children should be seen and not heard. If you're back in the day, just tell a kid what to do. And, we've seen so many child stars grow up to have these really challenging adult lives, and I believe part of that is because they were not given agency as children.
Absolutely.
And asked to do things that were developmentally not appropriate.
Oh my gosh, yes, I can like think of so many things, like even like the whole like Nickelodeon documentary that like came out last year. That was crazy. And it was like,
set.
My God. Yeah, Quiet on Set, that's what it was. So intense. Going back to, I guess, like more so choreography aspect of your role, which the fun part, exactly. I mean, and as an adult, like content creator, we've got to know our angles. I know what side looks good. I know, like, because I shoot a lot of my own stuff, it's just like, okay, I know, like, this is going to look good, or my fans will like this particular angle. This, like, is a specific perspective that they would want. Tell me about how much fun you have in your role when you're choreographing bodies and placements and people and all things.
That is my favorite part of the job. No question. In fact, the only downside to me about working in adult entertainment would be that I think for most intimacy coordinators in adult entertainment, there wouldn't be as much choreography because the director is usually a choreographer.
Yeah, exactly. They have that role.
The actors, like you're saying, they're very aware of their angles and their angles around intimacy. So, like, I can imagine in that industry, the IC's job. I mean, I imagine it because I've also talked to ICs that work in that industry.
In
adult. It's a lot of the safety part of it.
Yes.
Whereas in mainstream, there's plenty of directors that I work with who are like, Brooke, they're brilliant directors, but they're like, Brooke, I hate intimate scenes. Here's what I want. Can you just say it to them? And I'm like, I got you. Or directors, straight or queer, who are like, I just want this to feel authentic. What do you want? I have a like, bingo card of positions I want to see on screen before I die. And so that's the really fun part, is the getting to work with actors and a director to choreograph something that's really compelling. Yeah, it's just the best part.
Yeah, super fun. I can imagine. I mean, going more specifically back to your book, so The History of Intimacy, Professionals in Entertainment, an inside look at a movement. And I love that title because I think it's a movement. And like we talked about it a little bit briefly earlier on, but I know that you started off the book. Chapter 1 was including sex worker voices in like Black and brown body, which I think is so important. We always need to start there. I I'm glad, and I'm hoping that this was an intentional positioning, because I feel oftentimes, sex worker voices and BIPOC voices are often ignored or pushed to the side or tiptoed around. But you're like right out of the gate. We're gonna start here. Tell us about that, and why that's so important. Of course, you interviewed so many great people. We'll talk about the specific voices later on, but let's start there.
Yeah. Well, it's mostly important because it's the truth, right?
Yes, it is.
So,
It's true.
yeah, I think that's really what it comes down to is we didn't. The first chapter is called "We're Not the Ones Who Started This" or something to that end,
Yes.
and it's just true. Like there were all these other communities doing this amazing work, and many of us were part of those communities in some way or another. I also talk about the queer BDSM and kink communities.
Yeah, also important.
Yeah, we took tools that somebody else had curated. And so it's really important to name that. And I think particularly around sex work, it's important because there is still a stigma, and
Yes.
unfortunately, and uh, like distancing of mainstream actors and adult film actors. And
Oh, yes.
the work is actually so close together. So
Hmm.
the distancing creates that stigma. And if we are taking from a community and an industry's tools and then pushing them away, it's immoral.
That's not okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was important to me to start there for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly with Black women, and there is so much that Black women have done that, I
Yeah.
mean,
You had
we
a
talk
big
about the Me
section on
Too
that.
movement. Tarana Burke, perfect example. Tarana
Yeah.
Burke started the Me Too movement years and years and years before the mainstream Me Too movement happened.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and luckily, boy, I'm so bad with names, and I didn't write the person who texted about it or Twittered about it.
The actor? Oh my God.
Actor.
No, I can't remember either. It'll come back to us later.
Cut that out. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I said, for those of you listening, I said earlier that I have a hard time. I have a disability that makes retaining words hard. And so sometimes I forget names. And I wrote down a bunch of them, and I did not write down this one. But anyway.
That's okay.
It's okay. But Tarana Burke is a great example. But there's also people like Bell Hooks who wrote these incredible feminist theory that we take from. So it was intentional to start there, because the other thing is there are a lot of people who have done incredible work as intimacy coordinators who are doing it from very, very, very early on, who are not white. And yet, most of the people that got the most press at the beginning were white. Were white and cis,
right.
And most often at least straight passing, if not straight.
Yes.
And so it was important to me to start the book that way, and also to bring light to the brilliant intimacy coordinators that shaped this movement. Because I'm writing the first history book, not the only one. There will be plenty more, but I wanted us to start there, because if we miss those people, we miss so much. I mean, I'm the luckiest one. I got to talk to everybody. I've got these interviews I can listen to and be like, oh, that too. So, I didn't nearly include everyone, but that was the goal, is for people to get as much of the truth as I could uncover.
Yeah, no, that's so important too, because you had a lot of you incorporate a lot of different voices in your book, which is great. I love that, and of course, I recognize some names on there. We've had a couple past guests like Reese Piper.
Yeah.
We also had Addis Boucher on there as well. So I'm just like, oh, it's so nice to like first of all, it's so important to give sex workers credit, because I feel like we go on uncredited or discredited oftentimes. And I'm really, really glad that you were able to kind of start on that foot, and also to give sex workers a voice, but also like queer folk, and also like, what else are they saying? Yeah, just being able to give these minority groups a voice, which is super, super important. And I'm glad that you were able to start there.
Thanks. Do you know who Caitlin Bailey is?
No, but why does that name sound familiar?
She's a sex worker who has also a podcast called The Oldest Profession.
Yes.
Okay,
there
yeah.
we go. I was like, the host of, yes.
Yeah, and she also has a theater show called Horror's Eye View.
Cool.
So I just wanted to mention her because honestly, she has a lot of credit in my life in bringing this to my awareness, because she's a friend, and early on she let me read drafts of her script, and I've listened to parts of her podcast, and so like thinking about the
Such a good
history of
podcast.
sex work really helped me
Yes.
to think about the history of the intimacy industry.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I write about people in the book like Alley Oops and Lotus Lane,
Yes.
and April Flores, who we wanted to have join us today,
I know.
who are, you know, adult film performers and, or at least sex workers and intimacy coordinators. And those are people that are outspoken about it. But there are also lots of intimacy coordinators who have worked in sex work who don't feel safe to say that. And so
Totally.
part of the reason it was important to start the book there is the hopes that we can. I hope that if a producer reads the book, that they're like, oh, I would like to find an IC that's a sex worker. That person has like a huge amount of experience, particularly if they're doing work that's about sex workers.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. So important.
So I just wanted to point out the expertise that goes with it.
There is expertise that goes with that. I'm so glad you said that, because like I feel like nowadays I feel the industry is doing a lot better at hiring sex work consultants for whatever projects that they have going on that involve sex work, which is so great to finally hear, because you know how like there are. Okay, sometimes my qualm with mainstream is just like they have a particular view, which is obviously and oftentimes based on stereotypes when it comes to sex workers. And those stories are not always channeling us in a great light. And it's exhausting to see that and watch that reflect on screen sometimes. So I think it's really important that and really refreshing to finally hear that they're actually consulting with sex workers on a number of like things and like how to make this look authentic, as you were mentioning when you were talking about like queer sex, like how can this actually look like real and realistic and stuff. And I think it's important to incorporate that, and now I feel like we're finally being given the opportunity to do just that.
I mean, it's gonna make the TV and the movies better.
Yes.
Because otherwise what we get is the same thing over and over again. It's not only inaccurate, it's boring.
Yeah,
I've
it's predictable.
seen it before, right? I'm not that interested in it. But like, man, yeah. I just think that authenticity is so important. This isn't sex work. Well, actually it is. But I'm thinking of, did you know the series Bonding? So this first season was terrible. It was such bad representation. And then they brought in Olivia Troy, who's an intimacy coordinator who specializes in BDSM and kink. And they brought her in not only as the intimacy coordinator and BDSM consultant, they brought her in on the writing team. And so smart. And she helped make sure that they used people from the actual BDSM community as their background actors.
Yes.
So many things. And it's like the second season was so much better. It was so much
night
better.
and day.
Night and day. So like that's the difference. Like I didn't even care about the first season other than it made me angry. You know? And so I just think we're going to just have better, more interesting TV and film to watch. And I do think that the average person who's going to TV and film, they do go wanting to experience empathy and wanting to learn something that's not their own experience. And if they're being fed something that's not true, it's not necessarily their fault. So
no,
let's give accuracy. And
yeah. I think that's so important.
yeah, same.
Otherwise, like going on to what you said too, it's going to be kind of like very like cyclical, and it just keeps repeating the same kind of narrative, the same kind of angle, same kind of perspective, and it's just like, can we get away from that and like actually bring people on set that would really enhance this in a more authentic and accurate way.
Yeah. When I see something that's like different and authentic, I think about it for weeks. When I see that something that's predictable, I forget it the next day.
Yeah.
Literally.
I'm with you on that.
I watched this movie last night. They'll be like, what do you think? I'm like, it was fine. They'll be like, what was it about? And I'm like, and I know this is partly my disability, but I'll be like, I don't remember, like, but it's because it wasn't new. It didn't give me anything to like latch onto.
Or to think about or ruminate on. It's just kind of like recycled.
Yeah, totally.
Which is terrible. But going back to you, Brooke, and your book too, I mean, if people are going to want to give this a read, like what can they expect? What kind of voices can they hear from in the book for those who haven't read it?
Great. So I call it A History. I'm going to show it to the Patreon people. There's the book.
There we go. Yes.
I call it A History of Intimacy Professionals in Entertainment because it's not the history, it's a history. Yeah. And the subtitle, An Inside Look at a Movement, is meant to point out that this is my version of the story. I'm telling it to you from the inside with my own biases, with the access that I had. But the fun part and the goal was to talk to as many people as I could and research as many people as I could. And because it's the first history book, there wasn't a lot I could read. I could read press articles, a few journal articles, but there wasn't a lot of research I could do in the written form in advance. And as we talked about earlier, a lot of the press had been about white people. So I ended up interviewing people and then saying, who else should I talk to? And so there's people like, one of the first people were like, have you talked to Nicole Callender? And Nicole Callender is this incredible stunt woman, originally, Black stunt woman who is now one of the top intimacy coordinators, works all the time.
Amazing.
Amy Schumer called her the gold standard.
Yes.
Right? So she's one of the first people I interviewed in the book. And so there's quotes from her throughout. Troy, who we just talked about, that worked on bonding, she's in the book.
Love it.
Denise Divya Johnson, who was the first Black non-binary intimacy director on Broadway, as well as the first Black non-binary intimacy coordinator on TV and film.
Wow.
Has a chapter in the second part of the book where it's just an interview with them. And so there's tons of people. And then part 2 of the book, I start with Tonya Sina, who is considered one of the first people to write about this as an art form in, I think it was 2006. She wrote her thesis on how there should be intimacy choreography. So I interviewed her, and then Denise, and then Rachel Finley, who is an incredible voice and intimacy director. So she talks about the way the vocal instrument can communicate intimacy. She's amazing.
Wow.
And then the 3 of them are all in the US. And then after that, I talk with people from around the world. The first intimacy coordinator in Japan, the first one in India, one of the first in Mexico City. We have Poland. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, that was so fun because it really started in the US and the UK. So, like Anna Sophia, who I talked with in Mexico City, rather, she had been working for 2.5 years when I interviewed her, which at this point was like 1.5 years ago.
Okay.
So, like, what tools were you able to take from the US and UK? What did you have to change for it to work in your culture?
Right.
What do you guys do that we should be learning from?
Totally. Yeah.
And that was the most fascinating thing, the way like consent differs from country to country, the way other countries' film industries work. So so
many layers there.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think there's so many people in this book that have fascinating stories. And unlike my first book, which was also for the Patreon people, it was called
Yes.
The Intimacy Coordinator's Guidebook, Specialties for Stage and Screen. It was a guidebook about specialties, my soapbox. But that was such an industry book. I feel like this book is
Right.
more mainstream. Like if you are a
Yeah.
film buff, it'll be fun to read. So
great.
yeah, it was so fun to write. So fun.
Yeah. Oh my
Hard.
gosh. And just amazing. But well worth it too.
Totally.
I mean, it's so interesting, like especially like the second half of the book too, like incorporating all these different voices from different cultural context and a global context as well, and talking about like the activism that we've had here in North America and how that extends over across borders, across like the oceans and stuff too, and that even extends to like parallelly speaking in the adult industry too. Just my own experience talking about like this show just started off here specifically in the West Coast, and then when COVID happened, I was able to kind of break down those barriers and go interview people from across pond and see what's happening in Belgium, see what's happening in Singapore, and seeing what's going on in those countries and like what the legal ramifications are there, but also the challenges that come with that too. So I think it's so great that you're able to hear from all these different perspectives and bring it into this historical book, which is a really, really great read. So hopefully those who are listening, I'm sure you can draw a lot of parallels too, as we said here in the beginning of the show, talking about like the parallels with the adult industry and also with like mainstream media, because there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot there.
I mean, I think your podcast is so awesome, and I'm glad that you were able to talk with so many people in different cultures. I was just listening yesterday to the episode with, this is not about different cultures, but with Amina Green and Willow Ryder.
Yeah,
That's
so
a
great.
recent episode.
Love them. Yes.
And I loved listening to the episode because you talked about boundaries around their work life, around living together. You talked about how they communicate on set in order to not feel like a diva. You talked about self-care. You talked about their boundaries with fans. And I'm like, man, actors, like young actors could listen to this podcast, whether they want to go into adult film or mainstream, and it would be so helpful.
And so applicable to them too.
Applicable. Like those are the things that we talk about in intimacy. It's about power. It's about boundaries and consent. It's about, I mean, self-care is closure.
Yeah.
I mean, just recently, Audra McDonald, who was starring in Gypsy on Broadway, was followed home by a fan demanding her autograph into her building.
Oh my gosh.
And
that's terrifying.
Terrifying. And she went on social media and talked about how, actors need to be able to have boundaries from their fans.
Yeah, actors have lives. And like, we respect them, please.
Yeah. There's a part sometimes as fans that we think we know these people. We think, therefore, they owe us something.
Absolutely not.
No. You paid to see Audra in a show. That's what she owed you. She gave you that show.
Yeah. And that's where it ends.
That's where it ends.
When you leave that theater. Yeah.
So I really ends in the theater, appreciate how you talk about it on your podcast, because it feels, I mean, it's you're doing exactly the reason that I write in the first chapter, right? Like, there you go. Learn this from sex workers, among other
so great
groups.
Yes, absolutely. And again, thank you for including sex worker voices in your book too. Where can people find your book? Where can people find you? If we want to get in touch with Brooke, where can we find you?
I mean, if you Google history of intimacy professionals in entertainment, you can find it anywhere. I would strongly encourage you, if you have a local bookstore that you love, to buy it there. If you're in New York, the Drama Bookshop is a place I recommend. We will have had, by the time this airs, our launch at the Queer Bookshop inside the LGBTQ Center. So I really
congrats.
Thank you. Small bookshops are struggling. So if you can, buy it there. I will also say the publisher is Routledge Press, and there's almost always a discount if you buy it right from the publisher. So
there we go.
But you can find it on my website, which is brookemhaney.com. And you can find me there, or my Instagram is Brooke M. Haney Intimacy. And I'm not much of a social media person, so that's kind of it. Which is part of why I wouldn't be a great sex worker right now, because I would have to get really good at social media.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it's a thing. And that's why I'm just like, I hear you. I mean, there you go, people. Add this on your fall list of things to read for this fall and going into winter time. But if you are also looking to get in touch with myself, I am not very active right now. And that's kind of intentional. It feels great.
Yeah, good job. Set some boundaries.
Thank you. Yes, I personally hate social media, and I've been just trying to push that all into my content creation life now. And that's kind of where my energy is living. But if you do want to get in touch with me, you can. I still have notifications on X, so you can do that. It's Stripped by Sia, as well as on Instagram, Stripped by Sia Podcast. I'm also on Blue Sky. I don't really use that too much. I mean, yeah, you can find me in those two places, or even my website, strippedbysia.com. If you are wanting to be one of the last few episodes, which is going to be coming up soon, feel free to write in. There's a contact page there. Pitch yourself. I'd love to hear from you. Although I have some very specific topics I would love to tackle before we close this out officially. But that's where you can find me. And of course, if you still want to subscribe on Patreon and take advantage of all those wonderful bonuses, you can do that there. It's patreon.com/strippedbysia. And I will say a new episode will be on next Sunday. I'm not sure how many left there will be. I should be more strategic on this, but I'm just doing what kind of feels right to me right now. So that's where we're at with that. Yeah, right. It's been a long time. So but Brooke, it was so lovely having you on the show and just for you to explain and share the important work that you do in the industry. And I'm sure the adult film industry would love to have you on there as well. So if anyone's listening.
Thanks for having me. It was so nice talking with you.
Thank you so much, Brooke. We'll catch everyone in for another episode next week.